Hey, I'm going to walk you guys through how to make your quilt square, which is really just kind of a collage, right? This is a virtual quilt. It's not going to keep anybody warm, but we're really just sort of piecing something together. So to begin with, this template is in Google Classroom. And the first thing on our planning sheet is to pick a fabric that we talked about in class. And I like the Bogolanfini cloth. So the first thing I'm going to do is I did a search and I found one that I liked. And this is the mud cloth Bogolanfini from Mali. So I know that it's what I want it to be. So I did not mean to click on it. I can drag it right off of the page and drop it right on my quilt square. So you could drag this to the edge of the page. You could cover up the whole page with it. But I actually kind of like the way it's framed around the sides with white, and I might want to add another color. I'm thinking of some of the quilts we saw in our videos, like the log cabin and some different designs like that. So I'm going to stop right here, and I'm going to go to the next step, was that I need to pick an Adinkra symbol that I want to include. So I'm going to click on the link, and that will take me to the symbols that we looked at another point. And I wanted to choose one. And everyone knows that my favorite is Sankofa. So I'm going to use that symbol. I like both, but my favorite is definitely the heart. So I'm going to take that one and drop that on my template. And then I'll have to figure out a way that I want to incorporate it or change the color. But for now, I'm just laying everything that I want on my square. All right, now that I have the symbol that I like, I need to choose the name of any real person that I want to include. So if you look at the slavery profiles, those are the fake book profiles, and I'll show you where those are. All right, now I'm going to show you how to find the slavery profiles. So if you go back to week 15 is when we did that, the first week in December, and it says slavery profile. And that was where we worked on those fake book pages about different people from history. So any one of these would fit with Sankofa. I really like, Harriet Tubman is amazing and powerful and has done so many amazing things that I'm definitely going to want to include her name. And last time I did my square, I really liked this font that looked like I was, like I could have actually sewn it on there and embroidered it. So I'm not sure if I can find that one again quickly, but you can use whatever style you want. I like this one. And I think of Bisa, the artist video that we watched, and I know that she would like to use these Kool-Aid colors. So I'm going to use bright, intense colors. So Harriet Tubman is definitely the name that I want to include in my quilt. And I think her name is really important, so it needs to be nice and big. All right, the next requirement it takes a little bit of thinking, is we need to come up with a word to describe the tragedy of slavery and a visual, but also a word to describe triumph and a visual. So I want to think about that. And the way we talked about in class is, think about if someone asked you, why was slavery a tragedy? What would you say? How would you sum that up in just a word or two? And for me, it's always been about families separated. I think that's really powerful, maybe because I have kids, to think about what that would be like. And the visual for me is something that is torn apart. That's what I always think of. And the triumph would be, I think, people escaping from slavery. Escaping, we'll just go with the word escape, is the greatest triumph. And what is a symbol for that? I guess I think of things I've learned about the Underground Railroad, and I would think of maybe like a candle in the window, sort of lighting the way. All right, so now I need to think of how I'm going to include that in my quilt square. All right, I took my two words. One for triumph is escape, and the one for tragedy is families torn apart. And I had an idea. I thought, I bet there's a quilt technique out there to represent a candle, right? A candle in a window. And so I just searched candle in the window quilt, and I did find it's part of a Christmas quilt, but I think I could incorporate it into my quilt. And we aren't selling this. I'm sure there may be some copyright issues if we were to think about it. So I'm going to trim that down because I don't want the whole thing. But it's definitely something where I'm not actually going to piece all of it together. But the idea that a candle in the window might have guided people to freedom and to reuniting with their family, I think is a really powerful image and a powerful idea. So I want to make sure I include that. And I think the best way to show families torn apart is to have some torn pieces on the corners of my quilt. And I'll do that next. All right, the image I want to use for families torn apart is several pieces of different shapes because I could see someone piecing a quilt together like that. So I'm just choosing all different shapes and dragging them and creating them. And I'm going to layer them behind the words so that you can see it better and maybe make them some different colors.
Hi.
All right, so I have my two words. We can kind of put them by their symbols. And I had this idea of instead of just random pieces, I thought families torn apart almost kind of looks a little bit like a heart, which also ties in the Sankofa idea. So the final element is that I now need to think of 5 vocabulary words from the knowledge map that fit in with our story. And the knowledge map is way back in week 12, your slavery knowledge map vocabulary list. You could also search it in Google Drive. But what are some words that I could use that were related to the story of Harriet Tubman and the story of the Underground Railroad? I think there's a number of them that I could use. I have to think of 5, and then I have to include them in my quilts. All right, so I came up with 5 words that I think tell kind of a positive story. The Underground Railroad was a form of rebellion and resistance. Fighting to abolish slavery was really just a moral issue. Rebellion and resistance were simply what was right and moral. That's my why. And so those are the words that I have to incorporate. I decided that I liked the Sankofa symbol enough that I wanted it to be a bigger focal point of my quilt square. You can just drop it on there, that's fine. But I decided to play around with scribbles and drawing it, maybe making it look a little bit like it was actually sewn on there, because I think of the tiny stitches that Handful and her mother prized in the story. And so that it's all about what you want it to look like in the end and how do you want to tell the story. And to me, the story of Sankofa is very important. And so I wanted to add that. So the scribble is here if you wanted to find it and you wanted to draw something. You can play around with it. You can see if it works for you. I think a little bit at a time is good. I'm not an expert. But yeah, once we've done that, it's time to finish adding our vocabulary words and we'll have our square. All right, so I have a few white spaces that I might, just finish filling in. I'm thinking about, again, Bisa Butler and what she said about how her art teachers talked about filling in all the spaces with black as an alternate to adding white. But I've got all my vocabulary words on here. I've got my symbols. I've got my words for triumph and my words for tragedy. And I think my quilt square is done.